You swore your oath to a man, not to Rome, not to the Senate, not to the Republic or the Empire, or any abstract idea of what the Roman state was supposed to represent. You swore it to him, to the emperor, specifically, by name, in a ceremony that happened at enlistment and was renewed every year on the 1st of January, and again on his birthday. The words were specific. You swore to execute faithfully everything the emperor commanded, never to desert the service, never to seek to avoid death for the Roman Republic. The Sacramentum Militare, the military oath, bound you to a living man with the full weight of Roman religious law behind it. Breaking it was not just a military offense, it was a spiritual one. The oath had been sworn on sacred ground before the gods, with the full understanding that a man who violated it had placed himself outside the protection of everything that oath represented. Now that man is dead. Not in battle, not of illness. Killed by the men who were supposed to protect him, or by the senators who were supposed to serve him, or by the political machinery of an empire that had a long and practiced history of deciding that the current emperor needed to be replaced by a different emperor, and that the fastest route to that outcome was a blade in a corridor. And you are standing in your fort on the frontier with your sword and your armor, and 20 years of service and an oath that was sworn to a man who no longer exists. What happens now is not covered in the military regulations. Before this video is done, you're going to understand what happened to Roman soldiers in the specific, terrifying hours after an emperor was killed. Not to the Praetorian Guard in Rome, not to the senators scrambling for position, but to the ordinary legionary on a frontier posting who heard the news and understood, before anyone told him what to do, that the ground had just shifted under everything. The oath was personal. That was the design, and that was the problem. In the Roman Republic, the Sacramentum had been sworn to the consuls, the elected magistrates who commanded the armies for their year of office. When their year ended, the oath lapsed. New consuls, new oath. The mechanism was clean. The connection between the soldiers' loyalty and the political structure was managed through the institutional framework of the Republic. Augustus changed this. After the civil wars that had destroyed the Republic, after decades of Roman soldiers following Roman generals against other Roman soldiers, of loyalty being a commodity that commanders purchased with money and promises and land grants, Augustus reorganized the entire relationship between the emperor and the military. The legions became professional, fixed bases, standardized pay, formally regulated service terms, and the oath went directly to him, not to Rome, to Augustus personally, by name, and after Augustus, to Tiberius, by name, and after Tiberius, to Caligula. The oath renewed itself on the 1st of January every year and on the emperor's birthday, and at each renewal the soldiers swore to the specific living man who held the office. This made the legions loyal to the emperor in a way that no republican institution had ever been loyal to anything. It also meant that the loyalty was as mortal as the man it was sworn to. When the man died, the oath died with him. 69 A.D., the year of 4 emperors. Nero's suicide the previous year had left the empire without a universally recognized successor. Galba had been accepted in Rome, the Senate had recognized him, the Praetorian Guard had acquiesced, the machinery of imperial succession had produced a name and a face to attach the next oath to. The legions along the Rhine refused, not because they had a specific objection to Galba as a person, not because they had evaluated his military record or his administrative history and found it wanting, because their commander, Vitellius, had decided that Galba was not the right emperor, which meant that Vitellius had decided that Vitellius was the right emperor, which meant that the legions of the Rhine were now in the business of making emperors. This was not a position those legions had signed up for. The ordinary legionary on the Rhine in January of 69 AD had joined the military to march and build and fight on the frontier. He had sworn his oath to a man. That man was dead. A new man had been proposed. His commander had rejected the new man and proposed himself. What did you do with that? You marched with your commander. This was not a choice in any meaningful sense. A soldier on the Rhine in 69 AD who declined to follow his commander's decision about who the emperor should be was a soldier who had placed himself outside his unit, outside the formation, outside the only structure that had ever kept him alive. The formation was the thing that survived. The formation was now marching behind Vitellius. So you marched. 4 emperors in 1 year. Galba killed. Otho, who had killed Galba, killing himself after losing a battle. Vitellius, who had defeated Otho, killed when Vespasian's legions from the east arrived in Rome. Vespasian finally surviving, not because he was the most legitimate claimant, but because his legions were the last ones standing. 4 emperors, 4 oaths. 4 times the ground shifted under everything you had sworn on sacred ground in front of the gods. The gods, during 69 AD, did not appear to have strong opinions about which of the 4 men deserved the oath. 193 AD produced something worse. Commodus, the emperor who had spent 12 years systematically destroying the administrative competence his father Marcus Aurelius had built, was assassinated on the last day of December 192 AD by a conspiracy that included his mistress, his chamberlain, and a wrestler named Narcissus, who strangled him in his bath. The Praetorian Guard, whose entire institutional purpose was the protection of the emperor, had not protected the emperor. They had, in fact, been part of the network of people who had decided the emperor needed to not exist anymore. And then they did something that the sources record with the specific shock of men who have seen something they cannot quite believe they are writing down. They auctioned the empire. Pertinax, the new emperor they had initially accepted, was killed by the Guard itself after 87 days because he had attempted to restore military discipline, and the Guard had decided this was unacceptable. And then, with the empire vacant and the Guard in possession of the physical space where power resided, they announced that the throne was available. 2 men bid for it. Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator, outbid the other candidate. The Praetorian Guard accepted his money and declared him emperor. The provincial legions, when this information reached them, were not pleased. Not because they had loved Commodus. Commodus had been, by most accounts, a catastrophically bad emperor. Not because they had a deep attachment to Pertinax. They had barely known him. But because the Praetorian Guard had just demonstrated, in the most explicit possible way, that the oath the legions had sworn to a living man was a commodity that could be purchased, that the empire was for sale, that the thing they had built their entire military identity around, the personal loyalty to the emperor, the sacramentum sworn on sacred ground, had a price, and the Guard had collected it. The provincial legions had their own commanders, their own candidates, their own ideas about who should receive the next oath. 3 different provincial commanders were proclaimed emperor simultaneously. The legions of Syria backed Pescennius Niger. The legions of Britain backed Clodius Albinus. The legions of Pannonia backed Septimius Severus. 3 legions, 3 emperors, 3 oaths sworn simultaneously to 3 different men. The ordinary soldier in each of those legions had not participated in the decision about which candidate to support. His commander had made that decision. The formation had moved with the commander. The oath had been sworn to whoever the formation was now marching behind. Septimius Severus won. He marched on Rome, deposed Didius Julianus, disbanded the Praetorian Guard, executed as many of Niger's and Albinus's supporters as he could reach, and reorganized the military with the specific efficiency of a man who understood that the lesson of 193 AD was not that soldiers shouldn't make emperors. It was that you needed to make sure your soldiers made you. Here is what the ordinary legionary on the frontier understood from all of this. The oath he had sworn was sacred. The oath was also, in practice, only as permanent as the man who received it. When that man died, by illness, by battle, by assassination, by the Guards selling the throne to the highest bidder, the oath had to be resworn to someone. And who that someone was depended not on law, not on legitimacy, not on anything the ordinary soldier had any input into. It depended on his commander. His commander decided who the emperor was. The soldier followed the commander. The formation moved. This was the political reality of the Roman military from Augustus onward. The legions made emperors, not intentionally, not always willingly, but as a structural fact of a system that had put personal loyalty to a living man at the center of its military oath and had not adequately addressed what happened when that man was killed. The answer, it turned out, was civil war. Every time. Not every assassination produced a civil war. Some transitions were managed. Some successes were accepted quickly enough that the legions on the frontier received the news and the new oath before the situation had time to become something else. But every potential for civil war in the Roman imperial period ran through the same mechanism. The emperor is dead. The oath is void. Who swears to what next? The man who answered that question first, with enough legions behind him, became the next emperor. The soldiers who had sworn to the previous man marched with whoever their commander pointed them at. They did not choose. They did not deliberate. They followed the formation because the formation was the only thing that had ever kept them alive, and the formation went where the commander said. 4 emperors in 69 AD, 5 claimants in 193 AD, 26 emperors in 50 years during the crisis of the 3rd century. Most of them killed by the soldiers who had sworn to protect them. The oath was sacred. The oath was personal. The oath was sworn to a living man, and living men died. If this is the Rome you come here for, not the marble and the monuments, but the truth of what happened to ordinary soldiers when the machine at the top of the empire broke down, hit that like button and subscribe to Legacy of Rome. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, every week we go back into what it really meant to wear Roman armor. Subscribe and we'll keep making it.